Yo, what is up, guys? And today I'm going to be doing my last major conference preseason preview, which is the SEC. If you want to know why I have a Texas A&M shirt on, I don't really know, but they're in the SEC, and I don't really have merch from any other SEC team. I don't have like Alabama merch or anything. I don't know why I would have that. But anyways, we're gonna get right into this video, so I'm gonna give you guys pretty much just who I think are going to be like the top 5 or 6 teams, go through the roster, their experience, the schedule, and then ultimately get down to who I think the top 2 teams are going to be in Atlanta in the SEC championship. So, the first team, I guess, going in any particular order, the first team I'm going to be talking about today is Missouri. So, Missouri, according to this handy book that I have here, is well, I guess they have the weakest schedule among SEC teams, which not only that, but combine that with a talented and experienced roster, I think they're going to be in for a good year this year. I mean, if you look at the schedule, there are only like 2 or 3 games that they should lose at all. Like, we'll get into it here. So Murray State, that's obviously a win. Buffalo, that's a win. Boston College at home, win. Vanderbilt, that's a win. First 4 games of the year are home for Missouri, which is also very nice, and I think that's a nice, easy 4-0 start. Texas A&M on the road after a bye week, so their first road game of the year, and they go on the road against new coach Mike Elko and the Aggies. This is going to be a close game, but I do see them winning. I think that offense is going to have a nice time against Texas A&M. The Obviously, I think the unit of strength for Mizzou is going to be the offense. Their skill positions are going to be some of the best in the SEC, just talent wise. Brady Cook, you got not one but 2 Sunbelt transfer running backs, Marcus Carroll from Georgia State and Nate Noel from App State, Appalachian? I actually am not really sure. Appalachian, I don't know. Same thing. But that's an extremely underrated, however you pronounce it, that's an extremely underrated group of running backs right there. And then obviously, I think arguably the most talented player in the SEC, or one of them, Luther Burden at wide receiver. So I think the offense is going to be much stronger. Not to mention that they return 9 offensive starters from last year, and that doesn't include either Carroll or Noel, as obviously they didn't start because they were transfers from last year from those schools. So the offense is definitely going to be the unit of strength this year for Missouri. Going on with their schedule, so Texas A&M, I think that's a win, 5-0. One of the more interesting matchups in all of college football this year. I don't know how this got on the schedule, but they play UMass at UMass, which doesn't make any sense to me, but I think they win that too, and they're off to 6-0. Auburn at home, aka homecoming. I think that's also a win. 7-0, and then here's where they run into Alabama on the road just before a bye week. I think that is where they take their first loss. They're 7-1. After another bye week, they head into the final 4 weeks of the season, and this is a really nicely lined up final 4 weeks of the season. You got Oklahoma at home. Had that been in Norman, Oklahoma, I might have picked otherwise, but because it's in Columbia, Missouri, I think that's a win for the Tigers. South Carolina and Mississippi State both on the road, and Arkansas. I don't think any of those 3 teams will be near Mizzou's level, and that has them at 11-1. I think if they go 11-1, they might be an outside contender for the SEC championship, which is so weird to say because just before last offseason, we were saying that they were probably going to be fifth or sixth in the SEC East division. And now, even in this expanded SEC, they're going to have a shot at the SEC championship overall, which is just nuts. But they avoid Texas, not Alabama, but they avoid LSU. They avoid Georgia. I mean, that's probably the biggest one. They avoid Ole Miss. So all those teams they avoid on that schedule. So I would look out for Mizzou this year more than I think a lot of people are saying. I think the fact that they got left out of the AP top 10 too is a bit ridiculous. I think there are some teams up there in the top 10 who should not be, and I think Mizzou should be in their place. Moving on, we got Ole Miss is the second team we're going to talk about today. Ole Miss is literally the portal team. I could go through and name you this whole roster, and I would have to look more for a non transfer portal player than I would for a portal player. Jackson Dart, USC. Ulysses Bentley, he went to SMU. Henry Parrish, both of those guys in the running back room. He started at Ole Miss, went to Miami for 2 years, and then back to Ole Miss. Rashad Amos, the guy from the other Miami, the worst Miami, Miami, Ohio. He just has transferred everywhere and back in his college career. Trey Harris, wide receiver. He's from Louisiana Tech. Juice Wells. He's from South Carolina. A bunch of guys on defense, such as Walter Nolan. He's from Texas A&M. So I mean, you would have to look hard to find a not transfer portal player, if you will. So whether or not that's a good thing, I guess my answer is I don't really know. We're gonna find out. But if Colorado last year was an example of everything, it is that reshuffling the team yearly is not a good experiment to work on, and I guess we'll just have to see how they do this year. But we're not talking about Colorado today. We're going to get into the Ole Miss schedule. By the way, I think this is an incredibly talented team. This is easily, I think, arguably Lane Kiffin's most talented Ole Miss team that he has coached. Furman at home, I think that's a win. Middle Tennessee State. Now, as a Miami fan, if you guys know, we lost to Middle Tennessee State a few years ago. Horrible experience, would not recommend, but you never know what those Blue Raiders might be packing, but if they are anywhere near a CFP contender, they will blow MTSU out of the water. Wake Forest on the road, I think that's a win. Now, not getting into SEC play. Okay, Georgia Southern at home, I think that's also a win. So easy 4-0. Kentucky at home, I think that's another easy win, 5-0. South Carolina on the road, I think that's a win. But very interesting to point out that current Ole Miss wide receiver Juice Wells will be returning to his former school, South Carolina, in that game. So it's going to be a hostile environment, but I do think that they get the dub. Ole Miss in these past few years, more than any other team, I think has been like a late season choker, if you will, where they just lose and lose and lose in the off, or not the off season. I don't know what I'm talking about. In the later games of the season, I mean, if you look, where is it? 2022, they were, let's see, 8-1 to start the season, finished 8-5. So they start 6-0 according to what I think. LSU on the road. I think this Ole Miss LSU rivalry is, in my mind, very dependent on who has home field advantage. I do think that Ole Miss is more talented than LSU, but I don't know. I just think that Tiger Stadium environment is going to get to them. It's one of the toughest in the country to play in, and I do have LSU winning that game. Oklahoma at home, I do see them winning that. Oklahoma, um, I I kind of have mixed feelings about Oklahoma this year. They're going to be a good team to watch. They've got a good amount of talent on that team, but that schedule, and I just worry about them in year one in the SEC. I just don't know how they're going to do this year, and I say that because I don't really plan on covering them in depth in this video. So I'm just telling you guys now what I think about them. Arkansas on the road heading into November. I think that's a win. Arkansas, this is a big year for them, especially for head coach Sam Pittman. He is obviously one of the several coaches on the hot seat this year around the country, but I think there are a few coaches in the country whose seats are hotter than his, metaphorically. And he's really going to have to perform. He's got a new transfer QB coming in from Boise State. His name is Talon Green. Some other talent coming in from the transfer portal, so we'll see how it works out for the Hogs. Georgia at home, I also see them losing that one, and they fall to 2 SEC losses on the year, in my opinion. They have a bye, and then Florida on the road, Mississippi State at home. I think those are both wins, but I do see 10-2, which would not be enough to make the SEC championship game. But it is a very, very talented team. If they switch one of those two, either win at LSU or home against Georgia, SEC championship might be in sight for the Rebels. Moving on, Alabama. So Alabama, obviously, lots of change from last year. Lots of guys who are not there anymore who were there last year, such as, look no further than Nick Saban. Caleb Downs left to go to Ohio State. A lot of production at the skill positions, such as Isaiah Bond leaving for Texas, which I'll get to the horns in a bit, but I think this is definitely going to be a revamped, maybe a little lesser experienced Alabama team, but with that being said, it's Alabama nonetheless, and the most important thing also, or one of the most important things, is that Jalen Milroe is back for Alabama, and I think that's a huge thing, which is crazy to think because, I mean, we were, 3 weeks into the season, and Jalen Milroe was getting benched against South Florida, so it's a crazy world that we live in, but let's get into the schedule, shall we? So, Western Kentucky, a school that for some reason just knows how to produce quarterbacks like no other. Bailey Zappi. Who's the guy? Oh, Austin Reed. He's on the Bears now, I believe. The guy that followed up Bailey Zappi, and now they got a new guy transferring in who's transferred a few times, TJ Finley. So he's a former, I think, LSU and Auburn quarterback, if I'm not mistaken, and I think one other stop in between those two. So, we'll see how that works out. I think they'll be a strong team in Conference USA, but whoever their head coach is, I don't know him off the top of my head, but whoever their head coach is or their offensive coordinator, whoever it is, quarterback's coach, they're just doing a really nice job with QB play there. But with that being said, QB play is not going to be enough to beat Alabama. That was a long explanation. But USF at home, well, obviously, they played last year, and it was in Tampa, and I think the score was tied at half. I'm pretty sure. I think it was like it was like 10-3 Alabama for a while, and then the Tide pulled away with a late touchdown, but it was less than desirable, that's for sure, but I do not see that type of a close game this year with the Bulls. But I do think that USF is going to be arguably improved from last year, but I just don't see it being that tight a game in Tuscaloosa. But you never know. Going on the road against Wisconsin, I think I already talked about this game earlier in one of my previous videos. As I said in that video, I don't see a team that is quarterbacked by Tyler Van Dyke beating Alabama. I still stand by that statement. If that does happen, then I won't know what to say. That will be very shocking. But yeah, so 3-0 SEC play. Here we go. Georgia at home. So, right off the bat, an absolute huge game. September 28th is the date of that one. It is in Tuscaloosa. It's easily the biggest game at Bryant-Denny Stadium of the year, but for some reason, I have Georgia winning this one. Georgia has 3 huge road games, which I will get to in a bit this year. They have 3 huge road games, and that is the first of them. I have Georgia winning that one. Kalen DeBoer and all the new talent there in Tuscaloosa, I don't see it coming together by week 5. I don't know, like Alabama, as we saw last year, and obviously there are a lot of new pieces, new players, new coaches with that team, but Alabama in the later part of the season was so much better than they were in the beginning weeks of the season. So I don't see Alabama beating Georgia, unfortunately, or fortunately, whoever you're a fan of, but I have Georgia winning that game. And then we get Vanderbilt on the road, South Carolina at home. I don't see either of those being a problem. We go to 5-1. Tennessee on the road. I have not. Can I say this? I have not seen a fan base hold on to a victory more than Tennessee fans held on to their victory against Alabama. I think it's absolutely hilarious how stuck they were with that game and the field goal that got them the win, and they tore down the goalpost just to get smacked the year after. What was the score of that game? 34-20. Okay, it wasn't a smacking, but you know what I mean. It was hilarious to see Tennessee fans just boast that so much, but the game is back in Knoxville this year. It's going to be very interesting to see. I do have Alabama winning, though. It's going to be interesting to see how the Volunteers respond to that type of pressure with a new quarterback this year in Nico Iamaleava, I think. I probably butchered that, but it's okay. Missouri at home. That was the game that I had Missouri losing, so I'm not going to change it now. I think Alabama comes back and wins that one. So I have them at 7-1 heading into a bye. LSU on the road to start November 9th. This is a huge game. This is honestly, this is like a toss-up to me. I feel like, yeah, this is honestly a bit of a toss-up for me. I think I have Alabama taking this one. I really do. I don't know. This is gonna be, no matter what happens, and this is obviously kind of obvious, I guess, but this is probably a must-win to get into the SEC championship, unless they beat Georgia, which, I mean, they could. It's not. None of these predictions are like final. I mean, well, they are final, but like, you guys probably get what I'm saying. I hope. LSU's going to be a decent team. They also lost, obviously, Jaden Daniels, also Malik Neighbors, among several others. Got a new defensive coordinator, I think, in there after some defensive struggles from last year. Um, I don't know. I have Alabama winning. I don't know if I have an explanation exactly. Mercer at home, easy win. I don't need an explanation for that. Oklahoma on the road. I think I have Alabama winning that one as well. Oklahoma, I'm gonna have to look through their schedule. I might have them going like 7-5, which I feel really bad. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to predict like all these teams with like leaving one out, such as Oklahoma, and then you have Oklahoma going 6-6, and then you're like, well, I don't really agree with that, but it is what it is. I'm just oversharing. Auburn at home, Iron Bowl last week of the year. You know, we saw last year, you just never know what can happen in the Iron Bowl. It's probably just going to be a closer game than you would think. But I do have Alabama winning by some fashion. These last few years, we've seen multiple occasions where Alabama just should not have won the game. Last year, 4th and 31. Are you kidding me? The I think it was 2 years before the last one when it was at Jordan Hare, like 2021, I believe it was. Auburn had the ball. They were up like either 7 or 3, and I think Tank Bigsby, their running back, like ran out of bounds when he obviously didn't need to, and then they punted the ball, and Alabama won the game in like 3 overtimes. It's ridiculous. So the fact that it is in Tuscaloosa does help, so I do have them winning that. I say 11-1 for Alabama, obviously subject to change, as with everything. Texas is our second to last team that we're getting into today. Texas, a lot of change, a lot returning. Obviously, I mean, they got Steve Sarkisian, they got Quinn Ewers, they got their head coach, they got their quarterback. Not a lot of really solid teams from last year can say that. Michigan, Washington, Alabama, Florida State, no one can say that out of those teams who were right there on the brink of the college football playoffs. So, I mean, Georgia can, but okay. Kind of just ruining my own point. But anyways, they have that returning. CJ Baxter, man, that sucks. That is horrible for them. Obviously, the running back room at Texas has a lot of depth. They've got replacements for that, such as Jaden Blue, but you know, two great running backs is better than one, and unfortunately for the rest of the year, or three great running backs is better than two. I don't really know, but not trying to hurt feelings out here, but CJ Baxter, I mean that just really sucks for Texas. I hope he has a speedy recovery, although I mean they said it's a season-ending injury, so obviously it's not going to be that speedy, but hopefully it's as speedy as it can possibly be. I'll just say that and leave it there. They got some transfers in from the portal. Silas Bolden from Oregon State, who's also a what a weapon. Okay, I don't know, man. Weapon in the special teams game, returning kicks. He can be a really solid returner for Texas. I was thinking of a word and nothing came to me. I don't know. Isaiah Bond is going to be one of the better returning wide receivers in the SEC, but he's not returning to Alabama. Texas got him. Texas also got from Alabama tight end Amari Niblack, I think. Niblack, one of the two. So he's going to be their starting tight end. They lost Jatavian Sanders from last year, who was a very solid tight end for them, but they got Niblack back. So, or not back, but you guys know what I'm saying. Let's get into the schedule. Texas, of the teams I'm talking about today, does have, I think, one of the more preferable schedules. So let's get into it. Colorado State, that's a win. Michigan on the road. Well, the nice thing about this one is even if they lose, they're still 0-0 in conference play. So this has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not they make it to Atlanta. But otherwise, I still do think they win this one. Michigan, I think is obviously gonna take a step back, as I discussed in my Big Ten video. Um, I think some of the talent is still there for sure, but especially like that offense really worries me for Michigan, and I do think Texas wins that one. UTSA and ULM finish out the out of conference schedule. Those are both wins. UTSA could be a competitor in the AAC in year 2 in that conference. They were close last year. Mississippi State is home for the Horns. I think that's a win. They're 5-0. Oklahoma, so then they get a bye. Oklahoma, which is obviously in Dallas, the first Red River Showdown that features two SEC teams. So a little twist on that classic Big 12 rivalry, or what used to be a Big 12 rivalry, but then money got involved. I do think Texas wins that. Again, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I need to go through Oklahoma's schedule and like change some things because I probably would have Oklahoma like 6-6 if all of these predictions were correct, and I don't necessarily think that'll be true. So, I don't know. Georgia at home. This is a toss up for me. Again, this is really a toss up. Who do I think is the more talented team? Georgia, but as we know, the more talented team doesn't always win. And I just have a gut feeling that Texas gets it done here. I feel like Texas is going to pull through, and I'm sure the Texas is back claims are going to be just through the roof after that game. Um, I remember that one game. They beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl however many years ago. They beat Texas, and it was Sam Ellinger who just yelled into the microphone, "We're back," and it was hilarious. And then they just never backed it up. But that's Texas football for you. But this year, I mean, I think I'm looking at this schedule, and if that Georgia game goes their way, I mean, Vanderbilt on the road, that's a win. Home or away, wherever else, that's a win. Florida at home, that's a win. Florida's just going to get beaten up by that schedule. I would say I feel bad, but I really don't. It's going to be hilarious. Arkansas on the road, I think that's a win. Kentucky, and then Texas A&M. I can't wait to see Texas A&M and Texas go at. I can't wait to see a lot of games that Texas A&M will be in, but that's one of them. It is at Kyle Field. You just know that place is gonna be just rocking. But I just feel like Texas is gonna win, and this is crazy to say, but I have a gut feeling Texas is gonna go undefeated. I really do. And it's weird to say. It's weird to say. It doesn't feel right. I don't know. I don't know. We're gonna move on, I think. Um if they win that Georgia game, undefeated is not too far away. I'll break down the 3 or maybe 4 big ones. It's Michigan on the road, Oklahoma in the heart of Dallas, Georgia in Austin, and Texas A&M at Kyle Field. Those are the four big ones. I mean, you could break it down like that for any team, but man, I feel like they go undefeated, and I don't know why. Moving on, finally, Georgia. Here we go. So, Georgia, as I said, they return Kirby Smart, they return Carson Beck, so they are returning both the head coach and the QB, which are two of the most important positions on the team, obviously. They get Trevor Etienne to help out with the running back room. I think that's a huge get. He is a transfer from Florida. Make of that what you will. Transferred from Florida to Georgia, so really just tells you the direction where the game of college football is going. Guys are just transferring from Florida to Georgia and back vice versa. So, it is what it is. Dominic Lovett, he's another guy who transferred from an SEC East rival, Mizzou. Although that one, Mizzou to Georgia is not as bad as Florida to Georgia. I mean, that's a huge rivalry game. Colby Young, he's a Miami transfer. He was pretty solid for us last year, so it sucks to see him go, but looks like he'll get some playing time at Georgia, so that's good. And then Oscar Delp also returns at tight end, although it sucks to see Brock Bowers go. Last year he went to the Raiders. They also lose Ladd McConkey in the wide receiver room, which is big. They have 7 returning starters offensively, 7 on defense as well. We're going to get into the schedule here. Clemson, week 1. Can't wait for this game. I feel like Georgia, I just feel like neutral site games are where they thrive. I'm not going to lie. Like that one year against Oregon, what was it? 2022. 2022, that was one of the more dominant Georgia teams, one of the more dominant teams in the CFP era that I've ever seen. They beat Oregon 49-3. It wasn't Atlanta, so it was essentially a home game, but still, Oregon turned out to be a solid team that year, and they just wiped the floor with them. It was really not close. And I do think I'm not going to say a similar result as 49-3, but I do think Georgia handles Clemson. I'm worried about Cade Klubnik in that game. I really am. He's going to have to step up. He's going to have to show us something that we haven't seen from him, because if he's playing like he has in recent years, then it might be something like 49-3. I don't know, but we're going to have to see. Tennessee Tech, I'm not really sure who they are. That's a win. That's a win for Georgia, I think. Kentucky on the road, I think that's a win as well. They take a bye week, and then the absolute gauntlet of their road games this year begin. Alabama, I said that's going to be a win for the Bulldogs, and as I said previously, I'm not going to change something that I already predicted, so I feel like they win that. Auburn, Mississippi State, those are both wins. Those are both home as well. Texas on the road, I have them losing that, and I don't know why. Bye week, and then Florida, the biggest, what do they call it? The biggest cocktail party in the world or something. I don't know. Game is in Jacksonville. That is a win for Georgia. Ole Miss on the road is the final of their 3 that they have to play on the road. Not only do they play Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss, which I think are the 3 toughest teams besides themselves in the SEC, they have to go on the road to play all 3, which I feel is absolutely brutal. But I do think they win that. Ole Miss, as I said earlier in the video, kind of subject to some sort of late season fall off, if you will. And maybe that doesn't happen this year, you know? Maybe it doesn't happen, but we'll just have to see. It's the beautiful thing about college football. You just never know what's going to happen. Tennessee is a home game. I think that's a win. Massachusetts at home, aka UMass, and Georgia Tech at home. Those are all wins. I have them at 11-1. So, if you've been following along with my record predictions, you would have Texas undefeated, which I'm I just know that's going to be wrong. I know it's going to be wrong, but you know what? If they do go undefeated, you heard it here first, and I will hold out for the day that that happens when they beat Texas A&M in the last game of the season. Georgia 11-1, but I also had Missouri 11-1. Could Mizzou make the SEC championship? I don't know. And honestly, I wonder how the tiebreak system works too. That's another question. Because, like, Georgia and Mizzou, obviously, they don't play. So, I feel like Georgia maybe would get the edge because they lost to Texas. But I'm not really sure how that would work. But anyways, what I'm saying is I think the two most talented teams and the two teams I see in Atlanta are gonna be Georgia and Texas, and ultimately, for a little drama, because I feel like this happens every year where the team who wins the regular season matchup of the SEC championship loses in the actual game in Atlanta itself. And I do think that tradition holds on. I think Georgia wins the SEC over Texas, and that is just in case my Texas undefeated pick falls through. I have Georgia winning the SEC. I feel like that's a safe pick, and I do feel like they are the most talented team in the SEC. I just worry about those road games, Ole Miss, Texas, and Alabama. That's a pretty gruesome schedule, but those are my thoughts on the SEC. That will probably be the last preseason video that I have for you guys. I'm gonna try to make maybe 2 videos a week, 1 to 2 videos a week for the college football season. Probably like a reaction to the previous week and then outlining some matchups that I see in the future. Saturday up ahead, reactions to the AP Top 25, stuff like that. Reaction to the CFP bracket, CFP Top 25 when those do come out. So that is it for this one, and I will see you guys in the next one whenever that is. So I will see you guys later. Peace out.